Hey, it's me, ezzB, and I've been thinking about a number of changes that I have wanted COM2US to make in upcoming patches or versions of the game, and so I thought, what better way to end the year than doing a what I want from COM2US for Christmas. So, and it happened to be 12 things, so these are, what I want from COM2US for Summoner's War for the 12 days of Christmas. So let's get started with the honorable mentions. These are ideas of things that I wanted to change, but I've also heard about other people talking about them, so these are not ideas that I can take credit for. So let's get started with number 12. Rune Power-Ups. So it just takes forever when you want to power up a rune. I don't really care about the cost, but I care about just the time it takes to upgrade a rune. So I want to see one of two things. I want to see either a change to be made in the game where we can power up a rune while do something else, just how we can do our dungeon farming and then do something else. It'd be nice if we could actually power up a rune and then go play a few rounds in the arena or do our guild battles while we're waiting for that rune to power up. So that's one idea to help fix that. The other thing is it'd be nice if they could add a button where it would be roll, basically like not roll 10 times, but basically roll at 10 times the cost, but for 10 times the chance, right? So in terms of, it wouldn't change how much it costs to upgrade a rune, but you could just basically like spend more at the start, so that instead of having to say, let's say it takes on average 100 times to roll from plus 12 to plus 13. I know that's not the actual math, but you'd have a button that would allow you to roll from plus 12 to plus 13. It would cost 10 times the amount that a normal roll costs, but it would have 10 times the likelihood. So it would be a 1 in 10 chance instead of a 1 in 100 chance. Just do something, because it's just the time it takes to roll up a rune it's pretty annoying. And I know I'm not super great at rune management, but like just look at all these like plus 12s that I haven't bothered to roll to plus 15. And I mean, part of that is I'm bad at resource management. I don't have the mana to roll it, but even when I do have the mana, it just takes forever. So please do something about the rolls. This is something that I heard about, I think, on one of the podcasts that Island Grown had with some other people. I'm not sure who it was in the podcast who said it, so I'm not the first person to point out that it'd be nice if there was a way to fix the rune power up. But that's it. That's number 12. On to number 11. This is also not necessarily my idea only. I'm sure there's lots of people who have thought of this, but TOA. Can we do something about TOA? Can we put in a mode wherein if you can auto TOA 100, maybe on each rotation, so you have to do it twice in back-to-back months, then that will allow you to automatically just unlock the 10 stages, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. I haven't farmed TOA in a while, and I really should, because I could really use those Devil Mons. I could really use those 5-star Rainbow Mons. I'll always take an LD scroll, but it's been a few months now since I've done TOA, just because I've had a difficult time finding the time, and I think that it'd be nice, given how much content there is in the game and how much farming there is to do. Again, TOA was initially introduced like way back before there was a Tartarus Labyrinth, way back before there was Siege, way back before there were any of the rifts, way back before there was any of the dimensional hole and crystals and all of that stuff, way back before there was RTA. So I do think that the fact that we do have so much content that we can play on a daily basis, it'd be nice if they could figure out a way to just allow us to get those rewards, but in less time. And again, this is something that I think a lot of people have thought of, and again, I think I saw it on a similar Island Grown podcast. I think it was JMac who actually talked about it specifically, about doing something with TOA. So not my idea, not only my idea, but definitely something COM2US should think about. Number 10, these are still the honorable mentions, so these are still things that I am not the only person to think of. Instead of having a free rune removal day, I would love to see a free rune removal ticket. So whether that is for 12 hours, whether it's for 24 hours, whether that is for 48 hours, and maybe it only sits in your inbox for, 24, 48 hours. I just know that it's very difficult for me and other people, especially those like me who have small children. It can be difficult to be able to carve out that time to do that free rune removal during their allotted time period. So if they could, find a way to give us some flexibility in terms of when we do that within reason. I don't think it should be able to sit in your inbox for 100 days, 99 days, like some of the stuff that you buy from their shops. But I do think that, instead of changing it to a free rune removal day where everyone has it at the same time, it would be great to see it as a token that goes into your inbox once a month, and you have maybe even 24 hours to 48 hours to activate it, so that you can do it when you have the time to do it. Number 9, this is obviously a big one that a lot of people talked about: changes to RTA. So obviously we all know about the issue with bots. Foxy and Sean B have pointed out issues. Foxy just loves the bot hunting videos. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out. They're a lot of fun. I've encountered the bots as well, a lot, because I am a low RTA player. It doesn't bother me that much to play them, because I find that they're actually not very difficult to beat if you recognize that they're bots, and then you can just plan your strategy against them. But I don't think that's what we want in RTA. There are so many places in this game where you can auto, and I've even talked about making it even TOA so that it's faster or auto or able to be autoed. So I think with so many places where you can do that auto, it's really, really important that we do keep some of that live, in the moment. You have to be there gaming. And so I really think that in terms of, PvP, RTA, it has to be that area. So, COM2US, they should try to do what they can to try to figure out how those bots are taking advantage, and if there's anything they can do about it. I think one thing they should look at doing is just taking off the auto button. Make it so that you have to click skills, and maybe they should think about, you only have a certain number of turns, maybe 3 or 4 turns, where you are allowed to not make a play, and then after that you forfeit the match. And if you don't have a good enough wireless connection to play RTA, sorry, sucks to be you, but I do think they need to do what it takes to actually keep people actually live doing RTA. And one thing as well that I think will help in terms of RTA engagement and improvement, which I haven't really heard from anybody else, but I really think they should redo the tiers. Not necessarily in terms of how you get matched up or what the maybe the broad categories are, but I think there's not enough differentiation. So I wonder if either they should just come up with completely different labels. So instead of using the Guardian, Conqueror, Fighter levels that they use in regular Arena, come up with completely different tier names and then have more of them. Or if they want to stick with the same tiers, what about adding subdivisions? So your fighter 1, but maybe there are subcategories of that. So I was thinking maybe in terms of the runes, we have normal runes, magic runes, rare runes, hero runes, and legendary runes. So maybe you add that color to your rank as well, so that all of these low level RTA players like me, maybe we're Conqueror 1 in the arena, and so we feel like we're better than all the plebes, but then in RTA we're just like fighter 1 or fighter 2 or fighter 3. For me myself, I think I'm fighter 1 is where I'm at. But if I was fighter 1, but it was in that orange color, legendary color, I could then look down on all the fighter 1 players who are just white, right? So having some more, I don't know what the word is, styration, gradients or just degrees within each category, and differentiation, stratification, I think was the word I was thinking about. Anyway, that might help people feel more engaged, because right now I think so many of us just feel like we're all lumped in fighter 1 with everybody else, and so some differentiations between that would be useful. Maybe there isn't enough users using RTA on a regular basis in order to make that work, but I do think that that might be one area that might help with the engagement. Okay, that's it for the honorable mention. So now we are on to the bona fide list. These are ideas that I'm sure maybe other people have come up with, but I haven't heard anybody talking about them yet. If you've heard of them somewhere else, post a comment below and charge me with plagiarism. Or just say like, hey, I heard it here somewhere else first. But these are all things that I would like to see changed, and we're going to go from what I want least, like what's least important to me to change, to most important to change. And this is my own personal ranking, so feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Number 8, the thing that I want changed is the threat state. I just don't think it's quite a good enough mechanic, and I think they need to tweak it. So let's jump into, and of course, I care about this because I have a Jean, Ophelia, which, not very many people have, because it's a nat 5, but the paladins have been around for a while, so it's not the newest thing in the world, and there have got to be a bunch of them out there. You certainly saw Josephine in RTA quite a lot a couple of seasons ago, and it's still used occasionally. But here's the skill here. So this is the third skill. Creates a shield that's proportionate to 20% of your HP on all allies for 2 turns and activates the threat state while the enemy attacks 3 times. The enemy boss excluded can only attack the target under the threat state when using the attack skill. So my issue with the threat state is that it is an interesting feature because it's a buff that you have as opposed to a debuff on the enemy, so it can't be cleansed and ignores immunity. So in that sense, it actually theoretically is quite a powerful skill. But the fact that it only works for 3 turns is really quite limiting, especially if you get a monster that violent procs, right? So, a monster attacks you, violent procs attacks you again, and basically like it seems like it's only been one monster's turn, and yet that threat state is pretty much gone. It also doesn't stop AoE skills. So if you bring in monsters that have AoE attacks, you can just focus that AoE attack on the Ophelia, but attacks the whole team normally. So that's also a weakness. And then the other weakness that the threat state has is it doesn't stop you from a monster from using other skills. So if you have like a cleanse or a heal, you can just do that instead, as opposed to using the threat state attack, which again is a little bit different than the provoke. When you're provoked, you have to use that skill one. So I think the threat state needs a little bit of a rework just to make it slightly better. I think a couple ways that you could tweak it would be that the threat state will stay in place until it has been attacked once by all allies on the opposing team. Or the threat state stays in place until you yourself have taken 1 turn or 2 turns. I think that's probably the easier way to go in terms of coding. Would just be it's a buff that goes on yourself and it lasts for a number of turns. And then you don't have to worry about like enemy attacks or any of those things. But if that was the case, then I think then it starts to get to the point where it's a good enough mechanic for it to be used. Now, this is the lowest one on my list because there are hardly any monsters that have the threat state. I think there's still only 2 monsters in the entire game that have it, and one of them is an LD Nat 5. So basically, there's really only one achievable monster in the game that even has this skill. But I do think that if they reworked it, then it would be worthwhile bringing some new monsters into the game that also have the threat skill. And I think maybe the best way to do it is just make it that it's until you take another turn or you take X numbers of turns, and then that way, no matter how fast the enemy's team's going, it could help in slow cleave teams and fun stuff like that. So I think if you just rework it like just a tiny bit, it could be a decently balanced mechanic that could allow for Ophelia to get more play in Guild Wars and maybe even some arena defenses and RTA, and then also would make sense to bring in some new monsters that also had that threat state skill. Number 7. Another change that I would like COM2US to make is the ability to organize our monster box. So that means like in this screen here, we just see all of our monsters in the bottom. And I believe the order in which they show up is the order in which you summon the monster, which is like not that useful. Yeah, so I just like for them to either just be reorganized differently. What I would really like to see is that the order in which you place them in your monster box from your storage would be the way that they'd show up. They did a version of this for RTA where you can, select the monsters that you're going to use the most to sort of highlight them above your other monsters that you've used, which is good. But it'd be nice to see them do something like that for for your monster box in general. Number 6. Can we do something about the 1.5 power up XP? I don't know if I'm the only one that this happens to, but if I'm like, feeding my 1 stars and I'm at, it actually doesn't matter where I am, right? But whenever I get close to the end, and that's maybe only, I only need one more monster to power up it to level 15. It feels like every time I get that guaranteed lightning 1.5 XP. The worst is when you get it on your Super Angel Mon, so it's guaranteed to max it out to level 35 or level 40 anyway. Why give me that lightning of 1.5 XP? It just drives me bananas. I just it's probably the thing that like ruins my experience the most in Summoner's War is when I get those 1.5 lightnings when they can do me like no use at all. So what I would love to see is just remove it so that it can't be used from Super Angel Mons. That would make me really happy to just never get a 1.5 XP on a Super Angel Mon. But what I'd really like to see is, if they could just do some coding so it just does a simple check, like if you power up this monster, does it already max out your level? If yes, then just don't even bother applying the 1.5% chance for double XP. This is probably quite a difficult, programming fix, like relative to what people are going to get out of it. But again, it's not about how realistic this is or how hard it would be for COM2US to do it. It's what I want for Christmas. And that's what I want. I want you to fix the 1.5 power-ups. I never, ever, ever want to get that lightning 1.5 XP boost when I didn't need it anyway. It's like the most frustrating thing. Number 5. Here's where things start to get interesting. I've been thinking and looking at artifacts because for those of you who watched my video on speed and how speed works, I completely messed up how artifacts get applied with the speed mechanic. TLDR, they don't really come into play. A lot of the substats in artifacts that like hardly ever come into play. I am thinking of things like, this crit 4 skill damage, that's pretty useless. There are very few monsters that have a skill 4 crit damage. But, the biggest one are bomb damage, that's fairly weak. Damage dealt by attacking together, that's pretty weak. And damage dealt by reflect. So there are a few in here that there just aren't a lot of mons that have those skills to really make it worth it. And in particular, I want to talk about 2. The first one I want to talk about is the reflect damage. As soon as I can find it. There we go. Okay, so there are literally 3 monsters in the whole game that have reflect damage. Only 3, and maybe there are some passives. There is. So Lydia reflects damage. So there's going to be there's maybe a handful more, a few more that also reflect damage as a passive, but there's hardly any. And so either they should take that off of the artifacts, or and this is where I think things get interesting, they should bring in some new runes sets that would give you the opportunity to actually take advantage of these artifact sub stats. So, in particular, I would like to see a rune set that allows you to bring in another opponent when you attack. Now, I was thinking about, how do we make it balanced, right? And I think that if it's a 4 rune set to attack with one, to randomly attack with another unit, that's not really worth it. That doesn't seem like it would be strong enough to make it worthwhile. And then I thought, well, what if it's just a 2 units, like a 2 rune set to attack with one ally and one random ally. But I thought, well, if you put that 3 sets on your monster and you're bringing 2 other you plus 1 other ally, that could be up to 4 people attacking at a time. That could also be quite. I think that's overpowered. So then I thought, well, what about a 3 rune set? So if you apply this 3 rune set, then you could bring in another ally, and if you put on full team up set, that would be 6 runes, and that would be you and 2 other teammates. That actually seemed about right. So the problem there is that if you right now in the game, you'd either have to have 2 team up sets, or you would have to have a team up set and then a 2 rune set, and then you'd be guaranteed to have a broken set. So I thought, why not just bring in some 1 rune sets? So the first one I was thinking of, again, because we have this reflect boost artifact that is, you almost have a 25% chance to get it on your rune, on your artifact, and it does literally nothing except for like a handful of monsters in the game. Why not bring out a 1 rune artifact set that was a reflect, and it works similar to the way the shield mechanic worked, where it would maybe be like a separate beneficial effect, and it would last for a set number of turns. So maybe if you have 1 reflect rune reflects 5% damage start of each turn, and so it could be removed. I don't think it's powerful enough. It's just the start of your for 1 turn or for 2 turns or 3 turns, but maybe but then you'd have the ability to stack it, so that if you had maybe 6 reflect runes on, then maybe it would last for 6 turns and do 30% of the damage or something like that. Anyway, I'll leave it to the COM2US developer team to figure out, what's the right balance there in terms of making it OP or not OP. But I think that COM2US could get creative with a few more rune sets, especially runes that are going to help the artifacts come into play a little bit more. I think it is interesting if they thought about bringing out some 3-set runes and some 1-set runes. To really help us mix up. I think they could really mix up the gameplay and allow for some different combinations, and allow for some monsters to be used that maybe aren't being used, and also allow for some benefits to get from the artifacts. Number 4, this is what I want. I know we just got a recent 2A, but I want to talk about what I want from the next 2A. I want the elementals. I want the low elementals, the elementals, and the high elementals. I think that it would be such a cool idea. You set up your dungeon, and you already have 3 monsters that just perfectly all work to be grouped together in a dungeon, in a 2A dungeon. And I think that they potentially have some. And there's some potential there, right? You have decreased defense and reduce attack. The low edge elementals probably won't get a lot of play even once they're 2A'd. Maybe it makes them almost like a 4-star 2A as opposed to all the way to 5-star stats. But I think that would be a really cool idea to get those low elementals. They're the lowest monster in the game that you can awaken, and there is an LD one. So I think that could be really really interesting. And again, none of them have, I don't believe, none of them have the 3rd skill. So you could basically do whatever you want with the 3rd skill for the low elementals. For the elementals, I think that some of them actually have some really interesting skills. So for instance, this one decreases the inflicted damage from the ally for fire, water, and wind. Again, this one has the reflex damage, which you might as well put, if you get an artifact that just rolls all the way into reflect damage, then maybe that's what you do. And maybe you give reflect damage, maybe you give them all some sort of reflect damage as well, to be able to take them, to have them take advantage of that reflect in the artifacts. But I think they have some interesting skill sets that if they actually had stats, some of them could potentially be useful. And then when we talk about the high elementals, I mean, we have some potentially OP monsters here, right? Like Kali, like that is a great skill, and if you just make Kali a little tankier, like automatically this would be a monster I think that would just like jump right back into the meta because it has this ignore defense. Like Kali was I think the original one-shot king, and would get a chance to take that mantle back. I think the light high elemental has a really cool benefit as well. It's sort of a bit of a budget Chassoon skill, right? But also removes harmful effects. So I think that's a cool skill. And the dark one's not that great, but I think there are a couple monsters there that are really, really interesting, and I think there are some interesting things with the elementals, and it'd be cool to get the low elementals get some love, and actually have them maybe be used. Maybe they, with the new skills, they find a niche area of the game where they're useful PvE content or something. I just think that would be really cool. Number 3, and I think there are going to be a lot of people who laugh at me that this is so high up on the list, but for me, it is. I want to get rid of all Silver Star monsters and change them to Gold Star monsters. I want to have awakened forms of all of these monsters. I don't care that their stats are still going to be crap. I think that we're adding new monsters to the game. You already have these monsters in the games in terms of like the artistic resources. Already their skills are built. Why not allow us to awaken them? Maybe once they're awakened, you can also give them some new skills, right? A lot of them only have one skill. Like, let's give them at least 2 skills, right? And then opens the potential down the road for, you could actually maybe even 2A some of these things. And, all those people who, did, a bunch of level 6-star ghosts, maybe those ghosts actually become useful. So I don't think COM2US is going to do it, but again, this is what I want. I want to awaken these Silver Star monsters. They have done their job. We have eaten thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of them, and it's enough. Enough is enough. It's time they get some street cred. It's time they get some respect put on their names, and that they actually get names and can be awakened. Number 2. This maybe should go in the honorable mention because I know it's been an issue that's plagued Summoner's War for a while. There's been a lot of debate on it. But I do think that I have a couple of takes that are a little bit different than what other people have mentioned, and I couldn't put in the honorable mention one. It was too important to me. Number 2, Violent Procs. So I do think that Violent is still a tiny bit broken, and I think that what COM2US has done to try to fix it in terms of nerfing the percentage rate in which it procs was not the right way to go about it. I don't think it really achieved what it wanted it to achieve, and the fact that you can only proc once in RTA hasn't really achieved what it's wanted to achieve anyway. And I think that there are a couple of very small tweaks that you could make to Violent Runes to still leave them maybe just like powered, but just not maybe overpowered, and actually might nerf them enough that then you could maybe introduce ancient Violent Runes. And so there are 2 ways in which I think that you could change Violent Runes to make them still probably the most important force set, but to even it out really with Swift. And I think that would be one, make it so that you cannot violent proc out of an inability effect. So if you are stunned, you cannot proc out of a stun. If you're asleep, you cannot proc out of a sleep. If you're frozen, you cannot proc out of a frozen. Provoke, I think it's fine to proc out of provoke. But yeah, freeze, stun, sleep, I don't think you should be able to proc out of those. That would be one way to deal with it. But the way that I would actually like to deal with it, because I think that it would help highlight the importance of speed and how the speed mechanics work, is I think that it should change from gain a turn instantly to either 100% fill your attack bar, or 100 and something fill your attack bar. So maybe like 110% fill your attack bar, or yeah. And the reason is because, and I don't want to go into like a whole explainer on Summoner's War, but the difference between gaining a turn instantly and filling your attack bar to 100 or 100% is the difference between Belial being a crazy overpowered monster and being widely considered absolute trash. Because what happens when Belial is resurrected with 100% attack bar, Belial is at 100% attack bar and then gets one turn, and so gets one tick of speed. So depending on how fast your Belial is, it's maybe like 10% or 20%. But if there's any monster that is also at 100% or over 100%, because maybe they have been waiting a turn or two before they have moved to be able to like cycle in, they're going to take a turn first, and so your Belial gets resurrected and then just gets like one-shotted in one or two turns before you can even actually take a turn yourself. So I think that if they reduced it to just fills your attack bar 100%, that actually might nerf it too much. So maybe boost your attack bar to 105, 110. That would be a good way, so that yes, if you were ahead of, like if there was nobody else at 100% attack bar, then you would definitely get to go again. But if there are already monsters that have over 100 attack bar when you proc your violent, then you don't get to take that extra turn. And I think that would just really balance it out very easily and nicely. And so I think that's how what they should do in order to fix violent runes. If you don't understand the mechanics of how that works, go maybe watch my video on how speed works in Summoner's War, or go look up some other resources to figure it out. But I think that once you figure out how the speed works, I think it really makes a lot of sense to have violent not give you a turn instantly, but fill up your attack bar to 100% or 100, maybe plus something, 105, 110%, to balance it out. And then that way you could actually, potentially get rid of those restrictions in RTA, because you wouldn't jump to you would move to the back of the front of the line, as opposed to the front of the line. So and the other thing why I think this is just would be doing it as the attack bar would just be so crucial in RTA, is because it would limit the ability, or it wouldn't limit, but it would make it more likely that even when you violent procced, the other team might still cut in. And so that's really the issue. If you violent proc early in an RTA match, it's essentially game over, and there's nothing that you or anybody else can do, and it's GG. Whereas with the attack bar filled to 100 or to 100%, there's a greater likelihood that somebody on the opposing team has already crossed that 100 attack bar threshold, and so even though you violent procced, they would still get to go before you. So I'm not sure how hard it would be to change that mechanic, but I think gameplay wise it wouldn't change it too much, but I think it would balance it in a really, really nice way. So that's my number 2. Last but not least, and again, this is what the changes that I want made in Summoner's War. They may not be the changes that you want made in Summoner's War. They may not be the changes that anybody else wants in Summoner's War, but these are the changes that I want for Summoner's War. Either the end of this year, get working on it right away, COM2US, release it before New Year's, or maybe in 2021. I want to be able to program some of the monster AI. It sounds crazy, and initially I thought this is a pipe dream, and it largely is, but I think there are some very, very simple AI mechanics that you could turn over to users that would revolutionize the game and make it immensely more playable and immensely more likely that you could have different combinations. And so how I think that they could do it is allow you to select conditions under which you use a skill. So for instance, if there's a skill on a monster that in a certain situation you don't ever want to use it at all. So for instance, maybe you never want Lapis using skill 2 in the dungeons because you just always want it to be reducing attack bar, then you could go in and just say like, deprioritize this skill, right? So you just prioritize, skill 3 when this is up, that's your number 1 priority. This is, skill 1 is your number 2 priority, and then if either one of those skills is on cooldown, then use number 2 skill, which since skill 1 is never on cooldown, then it would just never come into play. The other thing where I think it would, where it'd be interesting to put it in place, is how the AI targets things. Right now, it just targets using a mix of elemental advantage, disadvantage, and then things like defense break and low HP. So it would be nice to circumvent those rules. And so maybe you have a monster that ignores defense. You would have the ability to select for that skill to target defense type monsters, right? Because you're ignoring defense. It will then target if the opposing player brings in a defense monster, then it would target that automatically. And or to just say to another unit, no matter what the elemental advantage, disadvantage is, just always attack an attack type monster, or always attack an HP monster, right? If you have a skill that maybe does an HP break, maybe set that to prioritize attacking HP monsters first, support monsters second, defense monster. I think there's all kinds of ways that just having a couple of minor mechanics opened up for us to put input in terms of how we're setting up our defenses in Guild War, in Arena, in Siege. It would make the game so much harder because you would have to figure out comps that work regardless of how the enemy's AI defense has been programmed. But it would make the game so much more rich because then you could have more monsters on defense in Guild Siege and Guild Wars. You could have more monsters on defense in Arena. It would keep the meta from getting stale. So I think that's actually a huge undertaking that I think COM2US should really consider, and it's probably going to take a lot of work. And so this is something that maybe they should save for the next giant update when they want to do new gameplay. But I just think that it would make the game so much more healthier. It would allow us to use so much more monsters. It would allow us, when there's a monster that we've identified that the AI on this skill is just doesn't work properly, then we could either prioritize it so that it's always going to go when it's up, or deprioritize it so that it goes so that it never it effectively never gets used at all. And then eventually it would be nice if it gave us a little more opportunity to test things under certain conditions. So it'd be nice, for instance, for Tattoo, that if she didn't use the detonate skill unless there was a continuous damage placed on the enemy, whereas right now sometimes she does, and then she does, as we all know, no damage. So that is a bit more advanced and is probably not something that they could introduce probably ever, but at least at the start, I do think there's a couple of things in terms of being able to target monsters based on their type or their attribute, and to prioritize in which order your skills are used, would allow for just so many more monsters to be used in so many different areas. Dungeons, I think it could open it up a lot more to different team comps. And again, all of the defenses in Arena, Guild War, Guild Siege, they would all just be so much smarter. You would see so much more of them. I just think it would just make the game so much more richer and just so much better. So that is it. That is my Christmas list. I'm going to do a quick recap. So the honorable mentions were Rune Power-Ups and TOA Quality of Life, the Rune Removal Ticket, and fixing RTA, getting rid of the bots, and then maybe giving more stratification in terms of the types of levels you could be. And then, for my actual recommendations, number 8 was the threat state, rework it. 7, be able to organize your monsters. Number 6, get rid of that 1.5 lightning for XP when we don't need it. Number 5, couple of new rune sets, a 3 rune set in Team Up and a 1 rune set with Reflect. Number 4 was the next 2A, give me all the elementals, the low elemental, the elemental, and the high elementals. Number 3, awaken those Silver Star monsters. They deserve it. It's their time. Number 2, violent runes make an attack bar fill instead of instantly gain a turn. Completely change the game, help to balance swift and violent. And then you can maybe even release ancient violent runes, which would be, I know COM2US would want to do that because it would help them make money. And then number 1, give us some AI programming so that we can make some of these monsters that we just can't use anywhere because their AI is a bit garbo, to make it work. So yeah, that's it. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I don't know if I'll see you again in 2020, but hopefully you have a great end of the year, and we'll get back here safe and sound in 2021.